Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to start the local panel. If everyone can take their seats, we'll get going. My name is Rick Rogers. I am Associate Director of the Office of Drinking Water and Source Water Protection in EPA's Mid-Atlantic Regional Office in Philadelphia. So I'm honored to moderate this panel. You've heard from the federal level of agencies and now just recently the state agencies. And now you're going to hear from your local authorities and townships. So I wanted to say thank you all for participating. Given the size of the panel, we don't have time to go through biographies of everybody. But I do want to say that I can speak personally here that everybody up here has done their utmost best to address this issue, work with the citizens, work with the Department of Defense and EPA and Pennsylvania DEP. So kudos to everyone here that has been impacted, and we look forward to hearing from you and your experiences. So we have Christopher Crockett from Aqua America, as well as Bill Walker, Mike Pickle, and Michael Magee from Horsham Township, Greg Schuster, Tim Hagee from Warminster Township, Barry Luber and Chad Corey from Warrington Township, as well as Kyle Seckinger and Michael Sullivan from Warwick Township. So we'll get started. We're just going to do this in alphabetical order. For Chris Crockett, Aqua America.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Chris Crockett. I'm our Chief Environmental Officer for Aqua America. And I want to thank EPA for inviting Aqua to participate in this session and discuss the serious issue around PFAS, challenging water systems today. Just to give a little background, next slide please. Aqua, Pennsylvania, we serve 1.2 million customers in the several county area of Delaware, Chester, Montgomery, Berks, and Bucks County. That includes 112 municipalities. At Aqua, our mission is protecting and providing their most essential resource, and whenever anything interferes with that, it really is taken incredibly seriously. We've worked very hard to make sure 24/7, 365 that our drinking water meets or exceeds any of the state or federal standards. And we really have been active and very concerned about the issue of PFAS, dedicating a lot of time and energy to addressing this for our customers. So since we're here and we're on limited time, we want to make sure that we're giving EPA our input on what we think their priorities should be. Second slide. We are experts at treating and delivering water. The picture up there shows, we invest in the highest levels of technology to be able to look for this down to the part per trillion level. We're one of the only water suppliers, certified laboratories for this in the states of New Jersey and PA. So we're experts at treating and delivering water, but we are not health experts. We are not toxicologists. We really depend on EPA and the federal and DEP and the federal state agencies to set those guidelines, to set those limits, and we've been doing that since 1974 with the Safe Drinking Water Act. With PFAS, we need to continue moving along with that process. So our first request to EPA is please set a standard as soon as possible for PFAS and PFOA, and also develop a clear framework on how we're going to tackle the remaining several thousand members of the PFAS family so that we can make the proper technology investments, not only to address the current chemicals we're talking about today, but the ones in the future that may not be treated the same way and may not work with GHC. Second, I want to make sure that we give a priority to cleaning up sources, as other speakers have mentioned. The sources of PFAS and PFOA in this area are well known at the military base, and we need to immediately address those sources, and we need to get them cleaned up as fast as possible. In fact, we would want EPA and DEP to make sure that they start implementing cleanup standards and that the DoD immediately accelerate a lot of the actions that they have. Specifically at the base, though they've been working on this, they really need to implement treatment on the discharge from the Air National Guard base, and they need to do it consistently and at a high level. Every day, thousands of parts per trillion of PFAS and PFOA go into the stream of Park Creek and go 12 miles downstream to drinking water intakes. That water is moved around and the contamination is spread throughout a much larger area than just the immediate base area. And that's another suggestion we have, is that the affected area of the bases is not just an arbitrary distance from the base, but based on science, because this contamination can spread much farther than originally believed. And last, we need to make sure that when we deal with cleanup and responsibilities, and we set standards for cleanup and responsibility, that the military is held responsible for paying for that cleanup and the long-term costs associated in those communities. And it's not just left as a burden on those communities. Next slide, please. So we want to talk about what we've been doing real briefly at Aqua America since the 2016 Health Advisory Level 70 parts per trillion. We immediately went through and started sampling our sources in eastern Montgomery County, looking for sources. Though none of our sources were above the health advisory of 70 parts per trillion, we did institute testing at a much more sensitive detection level than originally was available in 2014 and 2016. And we went and identified a couple of sources that were near that health advisory level, and we immediately took them offline and have burn shelf on, and we installed GAC filtration systems in them. In addition to that, we've collected over 1,100 samples for PFAS through our certified laboratory, and we've posted that information transparently for the public to see on our waterfacts.com website. So you can go on there and see information about what we've been detecting in your community. And we've been evaluating different types of treatment, getting familiar with how to implement these systems, and looking at new technologies that are out there. And we've also been spending a lot of time coordinating with communities, political representatives, as well as the Base Realignment Committee, and sharing our information with the military. Next slide, please. But that's not enough. We can't stop there. At Aqua, we have decided that in light of the recent information from the CDC report, and due to the lack of any guidance of a regulatory limit from EPA or DEP, we are going to continue moving forward with a tiered action plan, starting with sources that are at the highest concentrations and identifying actions, whether it's treatment or taking them offline, and working our way down to those systems and wells with the lowest concentrations. We're going to continue to implement that tiered plan until EPA and DEP implement regulatory guidance. We're doing this voluntarily and ahead of any regulations, with the anticipation that we will be supported by EPA and DEP in those actions, as well as local communities that help us with the permitting and siting process. Beyond that, we want to make sure that people know that we will continue to take action, and that we will continue to keep the public informed through our waterfacts.com website about what we're doing and our progress in implementing that plan. Last, I want to again thank EPA for inviting us here to talk about this, and letting EPA, DEP, and all of our partners know that we stand ready to be involved, provide our expertise and information and our assistance in any way possible to address this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Crockett. We're going to bounce on the other side of the stage now with Horsham Township. Up first is Bill Walker, the Township Manager for Horsham Township, followed by Mike Pickle from the Water and Sewer Authority, and then Michael Magee from the Horsham Land Redevelopment Authority.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. We are going to tag team on this presentation, myself and Mike Magee and Mike Pickle. We want to thank the EPA and DEP for this day and having us here and involved with this engagement. Next slide, please. So Horsham Township, we're a little over 17 square miles. We're home to over 26,000 residents, and we have 32,000 people that work in Horsham Township. We're also home to the Horsham Air Guard Station, and we have the entire Naval Air Station, Willow Grove, in our boundaries of Horsham Township. Next slide, please. So in July of 2014, none of us in Horsham even knew what PFCs or PFAS stood for, let alone how to pronounce it or spell it. But we got the results of a positive test in July of 2014, and we immediately took steps to come into compliance at that time. In May of 2016, EPA, of course, established and issued their lifetime health advisory level of 70 parts per trillion. And at that time, Horsham Township Council directed the staff and township consultants to come up with a short-term remediation plan and report back to them in 6 weeks. We weren't going to rely on anyone, the federal government or the state government, to take care of ourselves. Township Council adopted the Horsham standard, and that was non-detect. At that time in 2016, non-detect in the industry was 5 parts per trillion combined, and that was our goal. In 6 weeks, we were back in front of Township Council with 3 options of a short-term plan that would take us to non-detect. They selected one of the options, and we immediately started implementation of that option. We also retained the assistance of a public awareness firm to assist us, and retained an internationally recognized consultant to provide technical expertise. We started implementation of that plan, and Council immediately instructed the staff and consultants to develop a long-term remediation plan for Horsham Township. We again were in front of Horsham Council in September of 2016 with options for a long-term plan. Council selected one of those options to be implemented, and that option is currently being implemented. We completed our short-term remediation plan in early 2017, and I'm very happy to report in April of 2017, our public water system in Horsham Township has been at a non-detect status. All of these efforts have been accomplished at a very significant cost to the Horsham tax citizens. Currently, the out-of-pocket expense for Horsham Township is currently approaching $1 million. Even more importantly, the stigma of the contamination has potentially impacted local real estate values and employment opportunities. Next slide, please. So our 4-pronged approach to this in Horsham that we developed also in May of 2016 was education, communication, remediation, and compensation. And that's what we've been working on and working through since that time, and that's been our approach. Next slide, please. So Horsham has been able to accomplish these efforts through funding from a cooperative agreement with the United States Navy and the National Guard Bureau, also funding from a Penvest grant, an ongoing surcharge paid by the Horsham Water and Sewer Authority ratepayers that they should not be paying. We'll talk about that in our recommendations, but we had to place a PFC surcharge on the ratepayers to help pay to get to non-detect status, and also township funds, which I just mentioned. At this time, next slide, and at this time I'll turn it over to Mike Pickle with the Water and Sewer Authority.
Okay, thanks, Bill. When it comes to talking about the Horsham drinking water and the PFAS contamination, I'm gratified to say that the key word now is was, not is or has been, which is how you typically see it in the news or press releases, but was. When this was shut down and removed from service, those 2 wells that have been since returned to service last year with GAC treatment funded by the Navy. 3 more wells were impacted in 2016 when it was dropped to 70 parts per trillion. Those 3 wells have temporary GAC treatment on them right now, and one of the wells we're actually doing a pilot plant of ion exchange resin. We've also had to install 1.8 miles of new water mains to connect private wells where there wasn't water available. We needed extended those mains so that we could hook up private wells that were impacted. We've also, as part of our long-term plan that Bill mentioned, we are installing an interconnect with a second interconnect with one of the utilities in order to flow the water better through our system. And we are also now, with the money from the Penvest grant, installing carbon treatment on 5 more wells that are currently out of service. When these 5 wells come back into service, we will take the 3 wells that have a temporary GAC out of service to have permanent treatment installed on them, and we're also installing treatment on a interconnect with one of the neighboring utilities. In all, we will have 11 PFAS treatment systems in place. Next slide. So currently, right now, as Bill mentioned, we are achieving about 4 parts per trillion as a mass balance or weighted average, if you will, of the existing sources, and we tend to do better. But that level is 17 times lower than the current health action level of 70 parts per trillion. And as Bill mentioned, the cost right now of the carbon or ion exchange operational costs are expected to be about $1.2 million per year. Next slide. Challenges. Putting this treatment on can sometimes be very difficult. Not all of our wells are located on big plots of ground. Some of them are actually nicely tucked into neighborhoods. These GHD treatments are larger. If you can imagine taking a building that might be mistaken for a shed and now trying to make it about 3 to 4 times bigger and twice as high and sticking it next to a house, that's not popular. And that's the case with what we've had to do in some of these. Next slide. It's also not cheap. The operational costs are expensive. It's about $22,000 per vessel, and our treatment sites have multiple vessels, but $22,000 per vessel for exchanging the THC. The carbon changeouts, when we are doing them, we have to take the wells out of service, and currently it's not out for a number of days, so we lose that supply when we're doing that. Going from these, what had been traditional groundwater systems, where we'll now have 11 permanent PFAS treatment systems, is really a transformative undergoing of the Water Authority. Life will never be the same. It's going to be more difficult, more challenging. And we also are trying to get the ion exchange permanent, and we're working with the state on that so that we can move forward with hopefully something that can give us a smaller footprint and be cheaper. Next slide.
As mentioned by the state panel, private wells are very difficult. There's no government agency that regulates private wells, but they were impacted greatly with this contamination. So in Horsham Township, over 450 private wells were tested. 101 tested above the lifetime health advisory level. 88 of those 101 have been connected to the public water system, with others pending. And we have 78 properties that have been tested between 40 and 70 parts per trillion. And as Mike just mentioned, they extended about 2 miles, almost 2 miles of water main extensions for those, I believe it's 56 of the 78 properties. So 56 of the 78 properties now already have access to public water, to connect to public water. But private wells have been impacted greatly with this contamination. Next slide, please. Also mentioned by Chris from Aqua, we have great concern with the stormwater that is leaving both bases, the Horsham Air Guard Station and the Naval Air Station Willow Grove, and the levels that the surface water is leaving and going into the different watersheds, the Pennypack Creek watershed, and the Neshaminy watershed around the bases. They have taken some actions, both the Air Guard Station and the Navy base, but we are looking for more immediate short-term actions to completely stop that from getting into the creeks or greatly reduce it. So stormwater is another major concern of ours with the contamination. At this point, next slide please, and we'll turn it over to Mike Magee.
Hi, my name is Mike Magee. I'm the Executive Director of the Horsham Land Redevelopment Authority. The authority was created in 2006 as a result of the Base Realignment and Closure Act, which called for the closure of the former NASJRB Willow Grove. As has been pointed out, we still continue to have the Horsham Air Guard Station in town, which was the site of the previous United States Air Force Reserve Center. So we continue to have a strong military presence here in Horsham and delighted with that. However, when the Naval Air Station was declared surplus, it was incumbent upon the township to step forward and create an authority that was ultimately recognized by DOD, Department of Defense, Office of Economic Adjustment, as the after a long process, we created a redevelopment plan, which is depicted on the slide, and I won't bother going into all that, but the details of that plan are located on our website, www.hlra.org, and I would encourage those interested to visit that website. It's basically a mixed-use development. We have an extensive amount of office-type potential there, as well as residential and retail. So we're looking forward to that redevelopment. And next slide, please. Redevelopment at the base, BRAC law called for the properties to be closed and eligible for transfer to the private sector, getting it back on the tax roll. The properties theoretically were available to go back onto the tax rolls back in 2011. For various reasons that has not taken place, but the reason that's holding us up at this point is the PFAS issues surrounding the potential redevelopment of the property. We are unable to establish value at this time of the property, and we need, and what impact, if any, it has, the remediation will have on that redevelopment plan. The federal government, the United States Navy, will transfer the property and undoubtedly will have significant land use controls as well as deed restrictions on the property. We've yet to analyze that impact on our redevelopment plan. The ability to establish the property values is a key factor in our delay in redevelopment at this time. Next slide, please. Some of our concerns center around the lack of standards for soil, surface water, and sediment that put the LRA at risk with regard to our future development. The problem has been pointed out numerous times today that the problem is not really the water, it's the contaminant, it's the soils and so forth that leach in, the contamination leaches into our aquifer. And that needs to be addressed by EPA and standards have to be established so that we know how to move forward. Repeating myself here, current focus on the drinking water does not address the problem, and we need to move forward with that. Recommendations?
Next slide, please. So our recommendation and needs in Horsham. The impacts of the past exposure cannot be ignored. More extensive epidemiology testing for the community is needed to include former military members assigned to these bases. Risk communication strategies to address public concerns concerning past exposures and regulatory inconsistencies are needed. As the source of the PFAS contamination is known, citizens of Horsham should not bear any cost for removing PFAS from their drinking water, past or future cost. So, next slide, please. The raw water in the aquifer remains contaminated, and we know it's going to be a very long time that the aquifer will be contaminated. But the Horsham Water and Sewer Authority treating the water at their own wells should not be the long-term remediation method for the aquifer. Sources of PFAS remain at the base, in the water and in the soil, and it must be mitigated. The Horsham Water and Sewer Authority and other utilities and state primary agencies need guidance in determining the best available technologies for treatment and appropriate permitting strategies. Next slide, and turning it back to Mike.
From an LRA perspective, PFAS and PFOA should obviously be listed on the CERCLA hazardous substance, as in the CERCLA hazardous substance. The government should retain liability for all PFAS contamination resulting from past use and/or spills from the military property. The government standards should be consistent. Resolve the differences between ATSDR and EPA need to be resolved. EPA should require the former NASJRB Willow Grove and the Horsham Air Guard Station to have one remedial plan and that same expedited schedule. Given the financial impact to the township and its residents, the federal government should transfer ownership of the property at no cost once the remediation plan has been implemented.
Next slide, please. So Horsham continues to be a great place to live, work, and play. Thanks to the expedited efforts of the Horsham Township community, our drinking water continues to be high quality and safe. Horsham will be a leader in redeveloping property impacted by PFAS contamination. But we need EAP's help. We need EPA's assistance in promptly and quickly establishing standards. We need to move our community forward. Those of us who know Horsham, the Willow Grove base takes over 8% of our township, and we need to move our township forward, and we can't do that without standards being established for this communication, contamination, and the redevelopment of the Navy base. Next slide, please. So we thank you for coming to Horsham Township, EPA, for hosting this meeting, especially Region 3 staff that we continuously work with. We also thank the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection and the Southeast Regional Office that has continuously